Jason Usry, and I made a movie with Judd Nelson.
Welcome to I Made This from Do Anything Media, a show about passionate people executing their big ideas in realistic ways you can learn from to make your own big idea a reality. I'm Bill Meeks, and today I'm talking with Jason Usry. I know Jason Usry best as my former co-worker and the creative services director of WJCL 22 in Savannah, Georgia. But Jason's been writing screenplays on the side the entire time he's been working in television. This year, one of Jason's screenplays, Dead Water, got produced. It's not the first one he's had made, but it's the first one starring Breakfast Club star Judd Nelson, not to mention Starship Troopers Casper Van Dien. We'll find out how he got his movie made, and maybe get some storytelling tips along the way. And beyond talking about Dead Water, Jason also shared some insight on how a movie comes together between the creative side and the financial side. And he tells us about the dream project he'd make if Steven Spielberg showed up on his doorstep with a check. Wouldn't that be neat? Alright, I made this for you. Take a listen. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Jason. How are you doing down there in Savannah? Or up there, actually, from where I am.
It's good, man. I'm doing great. It was cold earlier this week, and now today it got close to 70 again. So it's just kind of the back and forth weather, but things up here are great.
I have a lot of love for Savannah. I think I've told you this in a prior life when we were coworkers, that me and my wife decided that we were going to get married in Savannah down at Tybee Island and everything. So
that's right.
I have a very special affection for that area.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, hopefully you guys can come back up and visit, and we can all go out for dinner or something. That'd be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to hold you to that.
Please do.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about the movie and this whole screenwriting thing. When did you get started doing screenwriting?
So I wrote my first screenplay when I was 17 years old. It's a very cheesy story. When I was in high school, I saw the movie Titanic with my high school girlfriend, which is a perfectly great movie. It's perfectly fine. But what struck me about the movie was not just that it was such a cinematic achievement, but that it seemed to have a different impact on the audience in a really, really tangible way. And it was the first time I'd seen a product have that kind of mesmerizing power over people.
And staying power, too, because didn't Titanic, it stayed in theaters for like a year or something, didn't it?
Forever. Yeah, man. I mean, people went to see it multiple times. I know my girlfriend dragged me to it 2 or 3 times. And yeah, there was something about that movie and that moment that was really, really powerful to me. And really turned me on. I'd always wanted to tell stories. I grew up in the South, and, I had grandparents that were really great kind of front porch storytellers. So there was always something kind of in my blood. My
grandparents had that too. My grandfather in particular, he would always call them true stories. He was like, okay, sit down. We're going to tell you some true stories.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. It just was, it was something different for me, and kind of at a moment in my life where I knew that it was time for me to try to start figuring out what I wanted to do. I decided I was going to go home and start writing a screenplay. And so I went home and started handwriting a screenplay first. So Titanic was in theaters in December. In February or whatever, I got my $200 tax refund check. And I went to the store and I bought one of those electronic typewriters that you could see one line of text on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I started transcribing what I'd handwritten, and then I finished writing the first draft of a screenplay.
Formatting a screenplay on a typewriter must have been hell. Just absolute hell.
It was awful, man. And I know it was all wrong. So, now it's so easy because you've got, Final Draft or maybe Imagining, all these programs that do it for you. But yeah, back then I was just trying to get something out, and it was the first time I'd ever really set out on a long form writing project and finished it. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could do this for other stories and that sort of thing. And so within 3 or 4 years, I'd written 1 or 2 a year, and then as I went into college, I had gotten a business scholarship, but it did not cover books or fees, and it was a private school, and I didn't have the cash to pay the fees and all the books. So I took advantage of the hope scholarship program which Georgia has, which pays for tuition fees and then gives a book stipend. So it made it a lot more economical for me to go to a state school. So I transferred to Valdosta State, and I was in the business program there. And I'll never forget, I was in a business management class. I had my little notepad out. I was writing on a screenplay. The professor called on me to answer a question, and I wasn't paying attention because I was so engaged in writing the screenplay. I was so embarrassed. Like I could still remember how red I know we're not recording audio or video, but my shirt's very red, and that's about as red as my face was. I went back to the main campus. I went to the mass media communication building. I walked in, and there was one light on, and a man by the name of Mike Savoy, who ended up becoming my advisor, was in his office. I told him, "Hey, look, I'm a business major right now, but I really want to write movies, make movies, and I'd love to kind of transfer in this department." And he told me I was foolish, that I'd make a lot more money if I stayed in business, which is true, by the way. And
yeah, I mean, there are successful screenwriters out there, but I don't think there's anyone, with a mansion.
Right. And so yeah, but he did tell me, he said, look, I can't blame you. I did kind of the same sort of thing. And he took me under his wing, and I had a great few years at Valdosta State. And that's kind of how it started. They even let me produce a short film that I wrote and directed and ended up editing. And so, yeah, I mean, I had a really good opportunity with them because they let us use the gear and all those things. So I learned a lot.
That's one nice thing if you're looking to get into filmmaking in school, is you just have, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment available to you. Production has been democratized a lot more these days. It's a lot cheaper. You can go out with your iPhone and shoot something that looks better than anything they shot in the 80s, any trauma film.
Right.
Good resource to kind of tap into there if you're in college.
Absolutely.
I did see, I was kind of like stalking you online. I hope you don't mind.
No.
I saw something about beloved pictures on your LinkedIn. What's that all about?
Okay, so yeah, a couple of good friends of mine and I years ago tried to get a production company off ground. The project that started that off was a screenplay called The Beloved that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Caleb Applegate. And Caleb is he's actually right now out in, I think it's Montana. It might be, I don't know. He's somewhere out that way, out west somewhere, producing a movie called All the Small Things. But he and I and another friend of ours, a guy named Michael Ludlam, kind of got together, and we were going to try to create some content. It was going to be difficult because I was in Savannah and they were in Northern California at the time.
Yeah, and the internet probably wasn't quite as robust as it is now either.
No, not at all. Not at all. There were a lot of phone calls and, emails and nothing like this, nothing that we could kind of just jump on video chat and talk about things kind of face to face. But, after we tried to get a few things off the ground, and after a while, I needed to move on to do some of my own projects. They stuck with it a little longer, and then they both kind of started going on to do their own projects. And I think all of us are, happy with all that. Like I talked to Caleb a couple of weeks ago. He's doing, awesome. I talk to Michael occasionally. We usually message back and forth on Facebook or LinkedIn. But yeah, I think it all worked out really well for all of us because we all kind of found our own little paths and our own spaces, So yeah, Beloved Pictures. That's a good memory.
Let's go ahead and get to the subject at hand here. That poster in the office behind you, Dead Water.
Yeah,
We are officially off the grid. This is the harpoon gun in case we run into any trouble.
What kind of trouble?
You guys are my guests. I hate to see anything happen to my best friend. Spooky, isn't it?
What's that?
Out here, all alone. What's wrong? She won't start. What?
What does that mean?
So it's not working.
Who's that?
I'm glad to see you. We got some boat trouble. I was worried you might be a pirate.
I got a parrot.
I just watched it today. A part of being a screenwriter is you need to be able to give a good elevator pitch. So why don't you give us like the elevator pitch on the movie and then tell us a little bit about where you got the idea for it.
So the movie is a combat veteran and his wife who are invited out on a glamorous vacation with a friend of his when things suddenly go horribly and terribly wrong. And so the story about how this came about is probably more interesting than the movie itself. Like it was born out of necessity, right? So I've written over the course of my life, I've written somewhere on the order of 25 or 30 screenplays that are original ideas that I have had. Now, of course, earlier on in my career, I wrote a lot of movies that were gigantic budget, big tentpole type movies.
Ambitious.
Yeah, extraordinarily ambitious. And as I have kind of grown and matured, both the content of what I've written has become a lot more from a mature perspective, but the way that I approach the process has also matured. So I'm a lot more cognizant of budget and logistics and that sort of thing. So, it makes it a little easier for me to work with producers. So this project happened because the producer and director, Chris Helton, he and I had worked together on a few different projects. I adapted a book that he had the option to called Do the Birds Still Sing in Hell. I wrote a movie that was kind of loosely based on he and his wife's, really more his wife's battle with breast cancer. That was the first project we worked on together. Mm-hmm. But I'd written a few projects that were kind of born out of his ideas that we were trying to get produced. And one day he called me and he said, "Hey, I've got a guy that has some money he wants to put into a film. Do you have anything for X budget level?" And I didn't, because even though I was tailoring things down, I still didn't have anything for that specific dollar amount. I said, no, I don't have anything for that, but we can write something. So the next day, he and I met at a Starbucks on Victory Drive in Savannah, Georgia. I remember I had just been to the dentist and I wasn't feeling all that great. But we sat down for like an hour and just kind of wrote a very, very broad. It was one of those things where I was like, all right, so we've got X amount of dollars, which wasn't a lot of money. That means we need limited cast on the locations. He goes, "What if we put them on a boat?" And I said, "We'll put them on a boat," which if you ask Chris now, he'd be like, "We're never putting them on a boat again," which I would agree with. Just because of the logistics, it's just a nightmare. But
I have some questions on that later on, I think.
Okay. So I went away for a few days and I wrote I think it was a 7-page treatment. And as I tell it, we argued about it for a couple of weeks. We had a couple things that he had something that was a sticking point, and it was a sticking point for me. And we argued about it. And we eventually compromised. And I think it worked better for the movie from that standpoint. It was kind of one of those things that we had a certain budget line we were trying to hit, and I just went out and I wrote for that target and tried to keep something that was a little suspenseful and you put some people out in the middle of the ocean where anything can happen and you're not sure what anybody's motives are. That's compelling to me. Mm-hmm. So I delivered the script. He went back to the investor, and the investor's like, "Yeah, I actually want to go into something else now." So the project then sat on the shelf for a year. Then another individual came forward who wanted to get into the film business and put the money up for this. Mm-hmm. And we shot last year in 2018 down in St. Croix. Can't remember I wasn't down there. Unfortunately, I did not. I did get to go down there after the fact and meet some of the people, but I did not get to go down during filming. But yeah, I mean, it turned out to be an interesting movie. But one of those things where we had a very, very, in our minds, very achievable goal, which was we're going to produce this movie, then we're going to go to the American film market and we're going to sell it ourselves. We're going to try to get enough to sell it, and then we'll move on to the next project. Mm-hmm. And then a company called VMI came in, who was our sales company. They really sparked to the project, and they sold it to Saban Films, who then turned around and got it to Lionsgate. So, it kind of grew a little larger than we anticipated. And I think had we realized that was going to happen, and Chris and I have talked about this, we might have stuck to our guns on we made some concessions we wouldn't have made. Had we realized how it was going to kind of grow and balloon a little bit. But
were you able to make any, or did you have to make any slight adjustments when, the people that you wrote it for ended up turning it down and then it ended up going to somewhere else? Like, did you have to, change some characters or change some scenes out?
I didn't really have to change any characters based on that. What I will say is that Judd Nelson, who is like one of the most interesting people I have ever, maybe the most interesting man I've ever met.
I find him very interesting myself.
He's like a cinephile to the nth degree. I mean, I got only a chance to spend about an hour and a half kind of in his presence, and I chatted with him a little bit, but he loves movies, man. Like he loves movies like you only hope that people in Hollywood love movies.
Yeah.
And what I will say is that he interpreted his character differently than I had written it. And so we went back and forth with some changes for that character in particular. And, and then of course things kind of happen on set, or they get out to a certain, situation they have to. So for instance, this kind of goes to your question. When we were first talking about this and I started to write the script, I asked Chris, the director, if there was a specific boat that he had in mind for our hero boat where they're going to have, so that I could go download the floor plan and then I could kind of try to see how to choreograph some of the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And so he told me, oh yeah, we're looking at this boat. So I went and did all that. I downloaded the floor plan. I put my mind in this, space, and I wrote scenes based on that space. But that wasn't the boat that ended up in the movie. The boat that ended up in the movie was, as you saw, a beautiful multi-million-dollar yacht.
Multiple levels and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, super, super nice. But the floor plan's different. So some of the work that I had done, the joke between Chris and I was that on the last day of shooting, we'd finally lock the script because he would be looking to the next day and say, oh, Jason, like, we've written the scene this way. Can you like work on it? Like, it's like the opposite of the way the floor plan is. And there's this and so we were in constant communication. And even though I wasn't on set every day, I was pretty involved in trying to make some of these different challenges work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's one of those kind of evolving things of the production process as you just kind of tackle issues as they come along.
You said, you sort of wrote this to a budget and to, maybe some idea of genre or anything, but did you find any way to kind of inject some of your personal experience or your personality into the script? There are certain, in all of my screenplays, I do write certain things that certain people that I love will know is for them, right? Mm-hmm. So in this one in particular, the scene where Cooper and Vivian are at home and he has been in the fight, but he's in the bathroom and he comes out and she's talking about what she's got for dinner. And she says she's got, the line is stuff for spaghetti. My mom always used to say, I've got stuff for spaghetti. It always kind of stuck with me. So there's things like that. And then, there will be things I'll drop in that my wife will recognize. And so I try to take some of the more human moments because, every story is about kind of relating to characters on a human level. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you one, if I can jump off Dead Water just for a second, my favorite kind of thing that you're talking about. I read a movie called Unicorn that I hope one day gets produced. It's one of those kind of bigger thing. And it's a dark fairy tale set during the Revolutionary War. And in it, there's a set of twins, a boy and girl, and the girl gets deathly ill. So the boy, who has heard stories from his grandfather that unicorns lived in the mountain, and if a touch of the unicorn's alicorn can heal any sickness, right? Mm-hmm. And so he jumps off on this journey, as a kid, tries to find this unicorn. And while he's on that journey, he goes to sleep, falls asleep in a forest with some companions, and these giant spiders come down and they sew his eyes shut with their web.
the reason I wrote that was because when I was a very little boy, I would get, sleep in my eyes, and I could barely open them, and I would tell my mom I had spiders in my eyes. And so that's kind of the stuff that I write to try to find some ways if I can relate something that somebody, and like sometimes they may not realize it, but I'll say, hey, like that's my tribute to what you've given me. So yeah, I do try to connect some of those moments in life that I found special and that somebody else might be able to connect with as well.
Getting back to Deadwater a little bit,
yeah.
You said, you had to kind of write a treatment. There was an investor, all this stuff. When you sit down just to write a screenplay, how much planning do you do? Do you just start page one and I have kind of an idea, or do you try and flesh it out as much as possible before you ever sit down with final draft?
It varies. I would say earlier on, I kind of started at page one. I had an idea for a first few scenes, and I would kind of try to plow through, and I'd figure it out as I went along. As I matured, I do try to outline a little more, and particular when I'm working with a producer or with other people, and a lot of times they need to know the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I always preface it with, look, here's what I'm thinking right now, but this is not concrete. Like, this thing can go, it'll stay largely close to what I'm giving you, but it can go, the process is a creative process. So you need to have room to be able to flex.
And discover things about the story that might not have occurred to you when you were in the outline process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not, I've written one screenplay, which I did kind of start to finish over a weekend. And it's actually still one of my better screenplays, I think, but the vast majority of them don't come that quickly. They come over, weeks and months of like trying to get things right and
blood, sweat, and tears.
Absolutely. And figuring something out on page 90 and realizing, oh my gosh, I got to set that up on page 18. And so there's a lot of that kind of shaping that goes along. And I do find that, if I can outline, usually I'll try to write a treatment. Recently, I worked on a project where I did a treatment, then a kind of a scene by scene sort of step outline that kind of outlined every scene and its place and its purpose. Mm-hmm. But broadly speaking, I think the inspiration can kind of take you any sort of way. Just now, as time is, I don't have as much of it, by myself anymore. As married. A little boy and
kids will eat up all your time. Absolutely.
Right, yeah, and all your food and everything.
Money.
As time has become a premium, I have tried to spend a little bit more of it focusing in on, all right, what is my agenda, and then what's my overall feeling and where I'm going to go, and then but still allowing myself as I'm going through the process to feel the freedom to move along the lanes how I may.
So I know you've mentioned that in a lot of cases you're working directly with producers or working within a few individuals to find financing and all this stuff. But back in the day, I did quite a bit of screenwriting. I lived in LA for a few years doing it. Yeah. How does a guy in Savannah, Georgia kind of tap into that system and get a movie made these days? I know back then it was all about query letters and you should fly out to LA for 3 weeks every quarter and, all that kind of stuff. But how do you go about it now? Well,
it's still a lot of relationship building. I'm going to be in LA actually in December for 4 or 5 days and have a bunch of meetings out there then. The way this really all happened, credit to Chris Helton, who's one of my best friends in the world. I'd do anything in the world for the guy. I met him 10 years ago at a networking meeting, and he was kind of the crazy guy at the front of the room saying, I want to bring a movie studio to Savannah, Georgia. And I was like, I need to know you. And so we met and had coffee, and I was going through a Steve Jobs phase. So I was in like a black, mock turtleneck and tight jeans, and we laugh about that now.
I know they've never made one, but if they ever happen to make a movie about Steve Jobs' life, I think you could totally play it.
That's funny.
You definitely have that Steve Jobs vibe.
Thank you. So I met him and kind of working through these other projects with him, we built a trust and a relationship together. And Chris was making a lot of building his own relationships, and I was building a lot of my own relationships. And at some point, a lot of those people kind of came together to bring us a little family film called Running From My Roots. Mm-hmm. At the time that I came on board, it was actually called Take Two for Faith. I was brought in to punch up, kind of put a more of a musical. When I got it, it was a former actress who'd gone home to her hometown because the spotlight became too bright, and she reconnects with her former high school boyfriend, who's a pastor at a struggling church, and she helps revive his ministry, sort of thing. But I was brought in to change things up a little bit, and we made it more of a musical story. Not that it was a musical, but added more of a musical bent to it. And so that was kind of my first project that I had, and I had to turn that around in a week, I think 8 days, something like that. The rewrite on that, and that was 4 or 5 summers ago. And then that was released last year, and then but through all that, Chris made some contacts which helped him get the first contact that wanted to finance Deadwater, which was reason that I wrote it. And then, that sort of thing happened. And then when we were out at AFM last year, which I was out in LA 3 or 4 days that time, I met up with the producer of Take Two for Faith, Running From My Roots, and she wanted me to work on sort of a companion piece to that. So I finished that draft earlier this year. It's supposed to go into production next year. And then I'm one of the actors from Running From My Roots introduced me to a guy who had a really compelling story. So I worked on a draft of that, finished that earlier this year. Hopefully that'll go into production next year. And then that same actor also, I'm working on a project for him in the next few weeks. He's moving a lot more into the producing realm. And again, it's just trying to build relationships with people. It's difficult being in Savannah and not having the kind of the FaceTime, but I feel very fortunate to have some really well placed relationships that I can kind of call on and go meet with and just bounce ideas off of. And and the other thing too is that I know that a lot of writers are temperamental about their work, and as you should be. You should care about what you do. Absolutely. Yeah. Fortunately, I somehow have the gift of someone can tell me that something I do sucks, and I can take it and not take it so personally that it paralyzes me, but instead try to understand what they're looking for. And because of that, people want to work with me and people want to give me opportunities. Because of that, it's broadened the network, right? Yeah, and that's such a great quality to have too. Like that. One of my favorite things in the world is, like you said, is to get told that something I did sucked, because then I know it sucks and I can fix it for the next time, fix it for this time, and I'll never do it again. It's the most useful thing you can do for me. Absolutely. 100% agree. But, you were talking a bit about, how these relationships have kind of empowered, these projects and these dreams of yours to become reality. If someone's out there and they don't have these kind of relationships built, do you have any advice for them to not necessarily get their foot in the door, but at least, get their head in the door so they can be like, hey, can I bring my feet in too? Yeah. So, one of the things that I did when I had zero relationships was I went to film festivals and tried to befriend kind of up and coming writers, directors, actors, producers. I went to a film festival called the Green Cove Springs Film Festival in Green Cove Springs, Florida, several years ago, 8, 9, 10 years. It's actually probably 13 or 14 years ago. And I met a guy there, or I didn't meet him. His movie played there is a guy named Gary Weeks. And Gary had a movie called 29 Reasons to Run. I think it's on Netflix. And it played that festival. And if the filmmaker wasn't there, I would reach out to them on their website and just say, hey, I was at such and such festival. I really liked your project, and I'm kind of a guy just trying to get in and would love to, pick your brain for any advice. And Gary Weeks, I saw him a few months ago, and I mentioned this to him, and he was he's a sweet guy and a really great actor. I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, man, hey, here's my number. Give me a call sometime. And I called him one day, and he was on the phone with me for an hour, just answering all of my questions. And he was extraordinarily helpful. But, there are people out there, I think, that want to help, send the elevator back down, so to speak, and to help, other people. Because the other thing, too, is, if someone that you've helped is successful, they're more likely to help you become more successful. And and I think I know that a lot of famous people in general get a bad rap because we only hear about the bad things that happen with them. But there are a lot of really good people that care to provide, quality content and a stepping stone for people that they think are going to kind of carry the torch in a positive way forward. So my advice would be to make sure that you're disciplined, as a writer and a creator, to not stop it, because it is lonely and hard and tiring, and it's real easy to stop. But if you stop, you're not going to get where you want to go. So to keep doing that, and then to look for those opportunities, even in ways that aren't, necessarily traditional, to just try to reach out to people that you respect and admire. Not too much of a stalkery way, but try to reach out to people you respect and admire, and who knows, they might open the door and say, hey, I'll listen to you. I'll listen to what you have to say, and and then that could spark just another door to open down the road.
You mentioned, what was it? You've written 23 screenplays, I think you said?
There's, I've lost count over the years. It's hovering somewhere between 25 and 30 screenplays.
How many do you think you wrote before it seemed like you were getting somewhere? Or what was that moment?
In a lot of ways, I don't know that I'm getting anywhere now.
Well, I know so many people have a movie with Judd Nelson in it.
Well, no, that's a good point. I really thought that when I adapted Do the Birds Still Sing in Hell for Chris, which is a great book, I really thought when we adapted that was going to be the one. And then, that was 3 or 4 screenplays ago, so probably 20 or so. Now, I don't think it has to be that many if you're in a position where you're exposed to the film industry every day and people that you can pass things like, I think if you're in LA or New York and you're kind of plugged into that scene, I don't think that you would have to write for that long, maybe half that long, like maybe 10 screenplays at that point. But, kind of being a little out of the zone, I think caused it to take a little longer. And I did think about going to LA in my early 20s. And I don't know whether I regret that or not. I don't regret it because I've got a great life here and I'm very happy with what's happened with my life. But, I do think that it could have been an interesting proposition. It was probably 20 screenplays really before I felt like, and that was because I'd made some connections that felt like, okay, they might be able to open a door. It wasn't because necessarily I probably felt like the work was there sooner, that I felt like I was competitive sooner than that, but pragmatically and realistically, it wasn't until probably 20 screenplays.
Beyond writing screenplays, you do have a full-time job.
I do.
How do you sort of balance both of those hats that you wear?
It's funny. I made a choice that I would never cross the streams, right? Because that's not right. So I do it's a lot of late nights, early mornings, and weekends for me. So, and the other thing too is, I have a little boy and a wife, and I don't want them to feel like I'm never there for them. So I wait until they go to bed. My wife goes to bed with, at the same time he does, which is good. So, I stay up a lot, they go to bed usually 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So I'm up, until midnight sometimes. Or if I go to sleep early, then I'm up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I work for 3 or 4 hours before I get ready, and I go to the office and I do my office thing. And then on the weekends, I get up and I do the same thing. During Grayson's nap on the weekends, I'll jump in here for 2-3 hours and try to knock some things out. So it really is, it's tough because, there's not a lot of time right now. Like, I haven't gotten to download Disney Plus, right? Or anything, or anything anybody else is talking about. I don't know what any of this stuff is right now.
You're like, what's a Mandalorian?
Exactly, right? Baby Yoda, what? And so, it's a lot of like late nights and early mornings right now for that. But it's something that I love. As I've said probably 1,000 times in my life, if I could not be a writer, I would have quit a long time ago. Mm-hmm. But it's a compulsion I have. It's something that I need to do to feel complete, and to feel like I'm working towards something. So I'm committed to the long hours and those things. And maybe someday it won't be as difficult. Maybe it'll be a little more of a full-time thing. But right now, I'm comfortable dealing with the reality as it is.
Yeah, well, writers in particular, I mean, all creatives are like this to some degree, but writers in particular, they definitely have that drive because basically you're sitting there talking to yourself for 20, 30, 40, 50 hours.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that passion, you don't have that drive, you're not going to stick there with it. You're going to be like, people would think this was dumb anyway.
Yeah.
And you'll get up and you'll leave. But you have the drive to sit there and stick with it.
Absolutely. That's 100% correct.
Why don't we get into a couple specific questions about the movie here? Why not?
Please.
Right?
Sure.
So the main character, Coop, there's this bit of a plot point where he has an issue where he's not taking his medication.
When we get home, I don't care. You are taking your medicine.
I'm taking my medicine. Why don't you count?
I've seen you throw them down the drain. I've seen it.
I don't like the way that it makes me feel.
Well, I don't like the way that you make me feel.
Did you do research on, exactly what was affecting him and what medication would be appropriate for that? Or did you just write pills down and that's it?
I did do research. I did a lot of research about PTSD and medication that administered for those sorts of things. And the good news is that Griff First, who played Coop in the movie, he actually did even more research. So the scenes where he's dealing with that are better than I had envisioned them in my head. But yeah, I do try to be pretty buttoned up in the research department. Sometimes things don't necessarily come out the way that you expect them to, or whatever. Like I said with the boat, and written a different boat, whatever. But yeah, I did do some research about that and kind of the physical and the uneven behaviors of people that are battling it, and the forlorn, zoned out the way that he is in this. That all that was from the research that I did.
Did any of that research, particularly with that character, did it inform the story at all? Did it sort of like feed back into the story as you were writing it? You were like, oh, wait a second, like maybe I could have him do this and that'll lead to this sort of thing.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think when you're writing something that's more character driven, it does tend to affect the way the plot rolls out. There were certain things that didn't make it into the movie that either because they were too difficult to shoot or they had to be changed on the day for some other logistical thing.
Yeah,
that actually probably were more tied into things he would have done because he had this experience as a combat Marine, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that anytime that you're writing a character driven piece, it does. You kind of have an idea of who this character is as you start, and then as you write and they solidify. And it's kind of like you start out with a ghost, and the more you write, the more real they become, mm-hmm. and more solid they become. Yeah, and so as you're doing that, kind of the second draft, you start saying, well, yeah, I think that if he did X, Y, Z here, then it impacts the story further down, and it just you kind of roll it back out that way. So Yeah, I think there was some of that.
To touch back on the research for just 1 second, how extensive do you go? Is it basically just, Wikipedia or WebMD, or do you actually reach out to any experts or anything in these fields that would apply?
It differs for each project. So with Deadwater, I tried to do a lot of solid online research, more in depth than just Wikipedia, but looking at some real case studies and things. For other projects, right now I'm developing a project. Actually, I'm developing 2 different projects with 2 different law enforcement professionals. So with them, they are experts and they have kind of connections into the drug world. Like for this one project yesterday, I was writing a document that kind of is an outline, and I did go online to look up, some things about the drug trade. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope my wife doesn't come here and look at my search history. But then I sent it over to him, and he'll go through and he'll assess as to whether it rings true or not. So it does vary. Obviously, the more perspective you can get on any critical piece of information is helpful. But the other thing too is you don't want the reality to take away from the cinematic value either. So there are some things with this other project that I'm working on. There are court scenes, and they're extraordinarily procedural and formal and that sort of stuff that we wanted to punch. And so my co-writer took basically the court transcripts and transcribed it. And so now we're taking, some of those things out in order to give it some more teeth. Mm-hmm. So there's a little give and take there. I do think that, it's important to try to build whatever your world is out as realistically as possible without discounting the cinematic value that you hope to achieve.
I think I might know the answer to this already, but our listeners might not. So I noticed in the movie, not only do you have the screenplay credit, but you also have an executive producer credit. People are often confused about why people have different executive producer credits. Why do you have yours?
I'll be honest with you. So Chris produced and directed this movie. Chris is my best friend. He would have been my best man at my wedding if my dad had not been. Okay. Mm-hmm. When I first saw the final cut with the credits on it, I was shocked. I did not realize I was going to be the executive producer. I think it's because I got paid so little. I'm kidding. No, I think it's because I've contributed so much to not just this project, but many projects that we've worked on together. It was an offering of respect that he gave to me, which I greatly appreciate. He's done a lot, for my career and his career, and I think it was a nod of respect to me. It surprised me, and we actually, as I recall, we were watching it together here. He came down to visit, mm-hmm. and I was like, "What is that?" And he just kind of patted me on the back and was just like, "Hey, man, go on." And so it was cool. It's a cool moment.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why that's such a nebulous title, because it's oftentimes for that reason, like, oh, this person put a little bit extra more than their first title had on it, or something like that.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, now I do have to ask you, just because, in a former life, we were coworkers, and I know you work around television news. Was the fact that Vivian was a reporter, was that influenced at all by your day job?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I can't, I don't remember actually if I said that she should be a reporter, if Chris said that she should be a reporter. But what I will say is that there is a big influence of kind of the television news gathering sort of life in a lot of my projects. There's a project that I've got that I'm trying to get produced called Monkey Island, which is based on a real place just off the coast of South Carolina up in my TV market. Uh-huh. And there's a very strong TV news influence in that project as well. And I wrote that project to be produced for like $25,000 by me and 6 buddies. And then some other producers have kind of circled it, and so I've kind of held off on self-producing. But yeah, that does play a big role in certain certain characters, and we obviously know that this didn't happen during a sweeps period, because Dien was able to go down and leave town for
like weeks and
exactly.
I'm sure it's just to, you're in there working around it day after day after day after day, and it just kind of gets in your bones.
Yeah.
So, when you sit down to write, I'm sure that's the first thing your mind goes to.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So you have this fine finished product, Dead Water here. You have stuff lined up, coming up. You have stuff you've done before. Let's go ahead and just go into the realm of complete fantasy here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say Steven Spielberg shows up at your door. He has a check for $250 million. What script are you going to write to make for him with that budget?
Oh man.
I mean, I know that's not a huge budget, but I'm assuming it's bigger than what Dead Water.
Yeah, just a smidge. I would probably go back if I got to choose a project. I would probably start with that unicorn project that I mentioned earlier. It's like I said, it's kind of a dark fairy tale. There are a lot of themes in it that matter to me. Loss of innocence, hope, and the most dreary of circumstances, and kind of the coming of age sort of story. I would love to do that. There's another story that I am desperate to do. It's actually a story based on a local, or sort of local, up in the Charleston TV market. It's a place called Somerville, and there were some firefighters who were fighting a furniture store fire about 9-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And one of those firefighters, the captain, was also a high school basketball coach. And he died in the fire, and the team played the next season without him as the coach. They had his fire helmet there on his seat every game, and they ended up winning the championship that year. And he had told them he had coached them all through, I think, from like 8th grade up through their high school years, and told them they were going to win a championship before they left school, and they had not done so. And then that season was kind of a tribute to him, and it's just stories like that I feel like, again, it gets you back to the whole reason that I started writing movies was I wanted to tell stories that I felt would have an impact on people and in a positive way, because as in your former life and the TV world, you're bombarded with a lot of negativity all the time, and and it gets really, really hard to shake some of that sometimes. So do want to write movies that that don't have agendas, but do have hope. Mm-hmm. That story about that basketball team in Somerville is something I'd like to do. I think it's set up somewhere right now, but it has been set up for like 10 years, and nothing's happened with it. So if I could get a hold of that, man, I'd jump all over that project. I think it'd be a great movie.
Well, I hope Steven Spielberg is waiting downstairs for you when we get done with this interview.
Great. If so, your check's in the mail.
Awesome. I can be an executive producer. It's perfect.
That's right. That's right. That's great.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap up here. But before we go, do you have any advice in general that we haven't already discussed for anyone aspiring to be a screenwriter like yourself?
I would just go back and echo what I said before. Making sure that you are serious about it. A lot of times show business seems like it's extraordinarily accessible because we're bombarded with it all the time, but it is a very, very, very difficult business. I just turned 39 last week, and I've been writing movies for 22 years, and it took me 21 of those 22 years before I ever saw anything on the screen. If I wasn't stubborn or stupid or whatever it is that I am, it wouldn't have happened for me, right? You have to maintain your commitment to being a screenwriter or a filmmaker or any creative professional. You really do have to be committed and disciplined in your approach to that goal. But then again, you also have to look at opportunities to leverage other people that you can work with, to open doors for you, and also to see ways that you can help them as well. You don't want to just take advantage of people, but look for ways that you can find those helping hands that can usher you to the next step, and then look for the next hand that's going to continue the progression, because it's a long road, and it's fun, but it's very, very tough, and I certainly hope people listening to this will get the sense that like it's doable. I'm a guy who grew up in a town called Cairo, Georgia, where my high school mascot was the syrup makers, and but not the kind of place that screenwriters are just, they're not just growing them on trees out there. I tell you that. So it's really cool to have and everybody has a unique voice, to trust their voice and to really, really try to develop that voice and their unique perspective, because it's valuable. I mean, I think one of the other things too that I haven't said is that you have to value your own perspective and experience and point of view, and believe in yourself, and really try to give yourself an opportunity. And the only way that you can do that is to play the game. So make sure to give it all you got, and don't quit. And hopefully we'll get to see a movie from whoever that person is that's listening to this.
His name's Steve. He's pretty cool.
Steve, please.
No, I really like that though. Like, cause yeah, as much as, that dedication and that hard work and that passion is important, I really like that you think that your professional relationships with other people is just as important, and all the passion and the hard work and the smarts in the world. If you're an asshole to everybody, then, you're never going to get anywhere.
Right. You can't do this alone, man. That's for sure. This is the thing that I love about, filmmaking is that you get to pull in the best of all the creative disciplines and put something together, and things go sideways all the time, and you have to figure it out. And, and then at the end of the day, as long as you're, again, all committed to the same vision and rowing in the same direction, you tend to have something come together that's pretty special. And it's an extraordinary thing to see something that, was once just a little spark in your brain on a screen. That is an extraordinary thing. And I'm glad I've gotten it to happen to me a couple times.
And we're all glad for you too, Jason. Thank you so much for joining me today. And people out there, if you want to check out Dead Water, it's available on a lot of platforms, but you can probably just go to Google's shopping and search for Dead Water, and it'll probably pop up several places there.
There you go. Thank you so much, Bill, man. It's great to talk to you again. I hope we can talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you have your own big idea you've made a reality, we want to hear about it. Let us know by emailing imadethis@doanything.media. We'd love to share your project, or maybe even talk to you about it. You can follow the show at imadethisshow, all one word, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, that's at imadethisshow. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or on our website, imadethis.doanything.media. Again, that's imadethis.doanything.media. And if you do subscribe, make sure you leave a review so we can shout you out on the show. I'm Bill Meeks. Thanks for listening.